Hello and welcome to Lit Illuminated. I'm thrilled to have you here with me today. This is a space where we talk about books and the ways that we get connected to the story. We connect ourselves to that story, but also the way that it integrates with the larger story of the world around us. Today we are looking at Black Woods, Blue Sky by Eowyn Ivey. I just finished this yesterday and I have been thinking about it nonstop, so I'm super excited to talk about it today. And to just give you like the start of where the book starts out, we have a character Birdie and with her daughter Emilyn, and living in Alaska and trying to eke out a life, an existence out there. And at the very beginning, Birdie is home from work. She wakes up and she decides to go fishing, and she heads out and, catches the fish, the whole thing. But the idea that nature is also a space that could be scary is introduced early on. And that is thinking like, oh, are there bears? Am I going to run into a moose? What's around me? Birdie's very aware of her environment. And her daughter, Emilyn, is concerned that her mom hasn't come back and decides to go into the woods to try to find her mom. And she subsequently gets lost. And Birdie comes back, realizes her daughter's gone. There's like a search going on. And then this character, Arthur, is the one that brings Emilyn back. And that sets up the whole story. So we have Birdie, she's a single mom, Emilyn, her daughter, and Arthur is the one that finds Emilyn out in the woods and brings her home safely to her mom. There are many other characters in here, but that's key to where the story takes us. So not only is it key of those three characters, but also that the place where they live is in the wilderness, and that there are things there that are potentially harmful or scary or, could hurt you, that you should always, as they talk about in the book, mind your P's and Q's, be, aware. And if you've ever lived in any of those places that have bears, especially grizzlies, there's often a thing when you're out in the woods that you're like, you occasionally want to speak and make noise so they hear you. So like a hey bear kind of concept. So we're getting that as part of the story. So early on, we move into the theme of time. And if you've been following me at all, you know that I love how time works, especially in stories, but that I see time as not linear, but more of a spiral. And so, you think of a spiral and it loops up, and that you can collapse it down. And so you can experience the past, present, and future simultaneously when you bring it down. And so early on, we get to this part, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to love this book so much. So Birdie's talking to Arthur and basically is asking him, like, why does he like talk the way he does? He seems to talk in a sense of present tense, or the way that he's talking about the world doesn't fall in line with the way that most people usually talk about it. And this is the quote. So Arthur hesitated, like maybe he wasn't sure he wanted to get into such a long conversation, but then he said, "It is more like circles, the circles spinning, each within another. There is nothing to hold on to." What does that mean? "Everything, every time, it is all now," he said. "I talk to you now, but I'm also knowing the day we sit on the table and together look at the mountains. And I'm also knowing that someday you are with me there in the mountains." Friends. That is the spiral collapsing. Arthur is perfectly sharing what that is, that the past, present, and future are together, and he's experiencing them simultaneously, or the awareness of them simultaneously. I was sold at that line. And so I loved how Arthur as a character allowed us to think about time differently in the way that he interacts with the other characters, in the way that he talks in that space. So again, this is just to kind of indicate how he continues to communicate and the things that are going on there. And so this is page 67, and he says, I'm troubled here. I try, but it's no good. He looked at the other side of the river. I am better when I'm away, over there. When I am young, I think that this is what I want, to be away from here. But when I'm older, I am one way, another, back again. The spiral of time. So, I love that so much. Now, if you have not read Blackwood's Blue Sky, and you do not want to know what happens, you should turn this video off now, because I'm going to now take you into this space and the whole themes of it, which I'm sure if you've been paying attention to people talking about the book, they've probably already talked about it, but I don't want to spoil it for anyone. So please, if you don't want to know what happens, you can stop it now, but know that it's going to be great because it talks about the spiral of time. So we get in this story a bear. Arthur is the bear, a grizzly bear, and he can take on and off the pelt. And so when he takes it off, he is human, and he appears human to everybody. But then he can put the pelt back on, and he is a bear. And we get this through the story of how he's found, and how he's taken in, and that he's so sickly because he's not eating and not doing well. And it's not until they realize that when they put the pelt back on him, he'll eat anything because it tastes different. He talks about that in the book too, about how it doesn't taste good when he's human, but that he enjoys food when he's a bear. And so where this gets complicated is that he's living up in the cabin up in the woods, and you have to get there by plane, and Birdie and Emilyn move out there with him. And they're very happy. It's beautiful to see the love and the relationship there, but also the ways that they interact. And early on, it's working really well. And in this, we know that Arthur just leaves occasionally and doesn't explain why, or doesn't seem to treat Birdie as she would expect to be treated, in the sense of like checking on her when they're going on a hike or carrying something for her. And you can see, and this is before we fully know the whole bear story, but you can see like there's a disconnect, but it's more than like a social awareness. It's more just there's an expectation there from him. Anyway, Emilyn sees Arthur take off the pelt, and she knows that he is a bear. And then things get complicated. Where Birdie starts to expect a little bit more out of the relationship, and in a normal sense of, where do you go? Why do you leave? Why aren't you staying with us? And at one point, and this is such a beautiful part of the book, she said, I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to have that freedom. Emily's my life, and I need to take care of her as her mom, but you get to just go off and not worry about anything. And I want to know what that's like. And so he does that. He allows that for her to go up into the mountains, and she follows a bear trail and gets blueberries and just kind of stays out and sleeps out in the night and comes home. And then there's this beautiful moment with them. And then he leaves again. And the next time he comes back, he's a bear. He's still a bear. And this is where Birdie sees a grizzly coming in and wants to protect her and her daughter, grabs the gun, they get inside, she's getting ready to shoot. The bear hears the gun and runs off. And the next time Arthur returns, she says, oh, hey, there was this big grizzly that came and I was able to scare it off, and just letting you know, you weren't here to protect us, but this is what happened. And so sad. He's like, okay, yeah, no, I'll stay. I won't go. I'm staying here. I'll stay here now. And he doesn't return to his pelt, and he becomes very, very sick. And Emilyn is trying to communicate to her mom that bears can be good, that some bears are kind and some bears are, we don't want to shoot all bears. And her mom's just like, what are you talking about? It's a grizzly. We don't want to risk this. And finally, he's so sick that Emilyn takes her mom and shows her the pelt and says that he needs to return to being a bear, which he does. And then there's this whole situation where he's trying to gain strength again and eat food again, because he hadn't been eating for that whole time, was very weak and very ill because of that. And he comes back and he continues to come back as a bear. I'm not going to go into what happens. I've been telling you everything, but I feel like there's some mystery there I want to leave for you. So what's interesting later on, Emily comes back as an adult. She's finished university and she goes back and she wants to see the cabin up in the woods and to, remember. And her whole life she was misremembering things in what happened in that time when Arthur remained a bear. And it was interesting to me the way that this story talks about, that spiral of time for Arthur and how he's able to experience it all simultaneously, even feel and sense his first mother, which he calls his first mother, which was the bear. But the other characters don't quite get that. But there's this idea of how we remember, and remembering alters not only the way we perceive ourselves, but the way we perceive others. And it's not until sometimes someone says, oh, no, that's not what happened, that you realize, oh. And so she was carrying some stuff with her whole life that wasn't actually true, which I'm glad in the book, she was able to figure that out. And this was that idea of some guilt in that space. And so it's often when the memory is around guilt or shame that it is misremembered, or that more emphasis is added to that in this book and in this story. And when you think about, again, how stories connect us to ourselves and to the stories around us and to the larger story of the world, you can see how some of that gets altered in our minds and in our thinking, especially from a young age. And so it was really interesting how Ivy used that character to kind of show that way of memory working. It's a beautiful book on love and what it means to love and what it means to be in love and to feel love, not only love of self, but love of others, the freedom in that space, the challenges in that space. It also has this really interesting idea around nature and humans and how it's connected. So throughout, we get these glimpses of how bears skeletally that they're connected to humans, that they have some of those same traits, and then the story that Arthur is a bear, that he transforms into a human. It reminds me a lot of the Silky mythology, the Celtic of the Selkie, that is a seal and a woman, and if you can capture her sealskin, then she has to remain a woman. If she can get back into her seal skin, she will go back into the ocean. And we have that same thing here with the bear. And so my thought process on all of this is where I was like, oh, this would be such a brilliant book to like write a paper on or to teach in school and think about the ways that the the imagery of the man bear. The mother also called Birdie because she, wanted to fly when she was little. And this is this idea of freedom and flight and nature and humans in nature and what that means to be a human in the natural world where you are a guest in some way, and what can happen in that space too. But also the idea of man animal, the idea of what it means to sense time differently, and the way that you think most people talk about how animals are very much in the present, but this idea that Arthur can also know the future and the past at the same time, that he can sense his mother who's past, as well as knowing the future where he's going with Birdie and the experience that they're going to have together. There's just so much in here that I feel like it allows for a space to very much investigate what it means to be human, what it means to live in nature, what it means to understand what love is, um, and the complexity of what constitutes a family, even, I think could be argued throughout this, and using the book as an examination of that. Anyway, I highly, 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 highly recommend Blackwood's Blue Sky by Eowyn Ivey. A beautiful book that I feel opens up a space that I haven't experienced in a long time. And I will continue to think about the ways that this story provides commentary on the ways that we interact in the world and the ways that we interact with each other and the ways that we interact with nature. It's just beautiful. I highly recommend it. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you again soon.